So this bright light started shining, and it was on the outside of our eyelids. So I opened my eyes, and it was just downright gorgeous. It was in the beginning, it was kind of like a white, kind of whitish light, and then it started getting colors, and it just kind of got brighter, and it was just, oh my God, to be back at that moment, it was gorgeous. Even though I was in that much damage and stuff, but it was just unbelievable. In this light, this figure started coming out of the light. It started to look like a grandfather, the figure, and it started to have a white robe, and it got closer and closer, and then to his side, all of a sudden, my kids started to show up uh, with him, and they got closer, and then it was
My guest today is Jim Bubba Bay, who had a near-death experience, and today he's going to share his story. So, Jim, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, I know my audience is going to look forward to hearing your story. Your story actually, I feel like, starts off with a little bit of tragedy. So, would you care to share a little bit about what your life was like before you had your NDE?
Sure, sure. I was pretty much a landscaper, and we have a family gas station, and we I got married at I was 1997. I got married. I since my brain injury, sometimes the math on the run kind of makes me a little confused. But anyway, I was married, and my wife at the time had two boys, two steps. They were my stepsons. They never met their dad, so I was their dad. But I told them to call me Jimmy from day one. When we're together and stuff, and it was great. I loved it. It's like they called me Jimmy whenever we were together, but they would tell you, "Hey, my dad's coming to pick me up." So
Oh,
it was like the perfect combination. I thought, because I didn't need to. Anybody could be a father, but be a dad is a whole nother thing. And so I didn't need to be their father. I just wanted to be their dad.
oh, I
Anyway,
love that. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. So that's the way I looked at it, and they called me Jimmy, and then my wife and I at the time, Yanina, wanted to have a biological, child together. So we had my son Logan, and he was actually born premature, but he lived in 1997. He actually was born a month before we were married. We were getting married already. It's just kind of like, okay, time to get married. Kind of sped things up a little bit. It wasn't planned exactly the way it happened, but that's the way life is. But
Right.
anyway, we ended up having Logan, and then we were talking, and Logan was my first child, biological child, and I treated the John and Robert, the twins, as my kids, from day one. But we were like, maybe we should have another child and make it four. So we decided to try, and my son James was conceived, and then 23 and a half weeks into the gestational period, he was born premature, and
23 weeks, that's so early.
yeah, yeah. We went to the hospital emergency, and call me crazy. So at the middle of the night, my wife Yanina at the time was screaming and yelling in the living room. I come in, I get woken up. I'm like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Oh, we got to go to the hospital. And the law, you're gonna laugh. The law-abiding citizen in me, I'm driving the speed limit to get to the hospital when she's in the back seat yelling and screaming, and I'm still driving the speed limit because I didn't know what was going on. I knew she was hurting, but I didn't know, like, gotta get there, gotta get there. So I didn't know. So I kind of driving along, but it was late at night too. I didn't want, part of me was like, get there fast. The other part of me is like, okay, it doesn't help if I get in an accident or, then we never get there. So anyway, we ended up getting to the hospital, and they, uh, they said he was, they needed to do a C-section, and they had trouble getting him out. He was so small; he was a pound 4 ounces, and they were reaching around trying to find him in there, and they finally got a hold of him. And so he was born, and he lived. He ended up living 10 days, and sadly, he died after 10 days. Uh, it was an amazing experience for me because The only thing I never could see was his eyes, the color of his eyes, because they were shot. But everything, he had 10 toes, 10 fingers, a head of black hair. It was incredible to see that at that age, how they were. So anyway, he lived 10 days. He was in neonatal intensive care and stuff. And another cool thing was one night he was hurting, and he was really having a bad night, and numbers were all down. And I showed up, and because and I made this song. I'm a horrible singer, but I made this song up, and every day I would sing it to him. And then this one night, you really could see the numbers, like he knew I was there. That's what the nurses said. And I believe them because they do it every day and they see everything. And I sang to him, and of course it was in a big room, so it wasn't private, but I didn't care. So I sang to him, and he moved. I couldn't hold him, of course. He was in the incubator. Anyway, so that was an incredible whole experience to see how really old how developed they are at that age. And we were told that there was a 50-50 shot he would live, and then probably a 50-50 shot that he would be special needs kind of child, that there would be some deficits being born that young and stuff. And so unfortunately, he died on my brother, John, held him when they pulled the plug. We got to hold him the last day they called and asked us to come give him permission that he wasn't going to make it. And I didn't want to hold him. I held him before, they pulled all the support, but I just wanted to remember in my head moving around like he did. So that's my last vision of him, is moving around. So anyway, in the process of it all, little do we know, this whole time, our son Robert, who was one of the twins, had kidney disease, and he had it since birth. So about 1 or 2 months later, after James died, it was diagnosed Robert had kidney disease. He had swollen feet and all that. And I'm just a landscaper. I'm in my 30s, and I don't know. I'm, just even the dad stuff's new to me. So anyway, I was like, oh, he must have been bit by a spider, because we had a very small home. Everybody had their own little room. Little did I know it was kidney disease, and they went and everything like that. So that was kind of shocking and stuff. And I look at it one way, and some people don't understand this, but for me, is Robert became a full-time job. He was 12 or 13 when he got diagnosed, and he had it from birth. And I think God, if you believe in God, and I know God doesn't kill anybody like that, but if you believe in the spirit or whatever like that, it was almost like we couldn't handle two special needs. I mean, we would have. I'm not going to lie. We would have done our best, and we would have given it our all. But it's almost like, wow, that would have been a lot on our plate to have, James, having his, and then Robert, his kidneys. I think they were functioning at 5%. One kidney was shot down, the other kidney, and so we ended up doing peritoneal at home, because there was all this crazy driving. I live in the country, so we had to drive. And my wife did most of the driving, an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes just to get to the hospital. And they would call on a Friday, hey, you got to come. His blood work was bad. And we drive up there and spend 7 hours and then get told to go home. So it was crazy. So a lot was involved with him. Anyway, so in some ways, I think maybe James moved on so that we could take care of Robert, who was more, he was at 12 or, along in the process already and stuff. I could be wrong, and we would have done the best we could. But anyway, so now we have, Robert very sick and everything. He got a kidney transplant, and then it was,
Oh, wow. He did get a kidney transplant.
yeah, from his Aunt Natalie, and it worked for a little while, and then it didn't. And then with all this tragedy and stuff, my wife wanted to move to Arizona. I'm a New York boy, New York State boy. I'm not a New York City. I'm not a city guy. I'm a country guy. And anyway, she wanted to move to Arizona. She had a friend out there, so we moved to Arizona. And Robert went with us, but Robert wanted to do, diesel mechanic. And he was 18, graduated high school and all that stuff. So we gave him, the best we could. And looking back at it, we shouldn't have let him live on his own, because he had to do the peritoneal at home and stuff. But in the end, ex-wife found him because Yanina and I have split up since then, but Yanina found him dead in his apartment after 3 or 4 days. So you could imagine what she saw. We never talked, and I don't wish any mother to find their child, passed away, especially 3 or 4 days later. But she found him.
So sorry.
Yeah, and then James was buried here in New York, and they had told us we don't wish anything bad on you, but if you ever have a big person die, they could be buried in the same grave site because the casket was like a little 1 2 foot little tiny casket. And so we brought Robert back to be buried with his brother. The
Oh,
cool, it's sad, but one cool thing is we never picked a gravestone until Robert died, and now I know why, because we went and found the gravestone. It was perfect. It's a heart with two hands holding, hands, and it kind of like both of them in the same place.
yeah.
So, so that was, that was kind of our life. And then we split up. We had financial, with all the kidney disease and everything. We had the best insurance. My wife worked for the state at the time, but all those copays get really burdensome, and you could have really great insurance, but if you have a lot of copays, it starts to add up, and then the gas to go there and here and drive around. So it was rough. So we split up, and at the time, some people say, "Oh, have you ever blamed God or whatever for any of that?" And I don't. And the reason why I never have is because my grandfather died when my dad's dad died when my dad was 16, and I've never heard once my dad blame God at all for any of that tragedy that he went through. So I was taught, it's not God's fault, and everything like that. So people ask, "Oh, you should be mad," so I wasn't. And then I just, I moved to Hammertown Road where my ND happened. And other than that, I just was living life. I was sad. I was missing my kids. We had a daughter born after that, Lauren, and she was premature. So all of them were premature, the ones we had together. And then we stopped, of course. It was getting too, risky. But Lauren was born, and the crazy thing is she was in the neonatal for 10 days, and I went down to visit her, and she was gone. And I freaked out because she wasn't in the room no more. And I didn't know it, but there was like a good room. There was like a room where they're graduating and getting better. And they had moved her because she was doing so well. And I didn't know. But the girls are way much more developed than the boys. So they have a better shot of being premature and living than the boys do. And it goes to show. And yeah, so that was my life before. I Another thing I want to say, probably your audience would appreciate, is because it's all changed since. But prior to my NDE, I was a Christian. I was a creature Christian, I called it, where I went to church on Christmas and Easter. But other than that, I didn't go to church, and I didn't know the Bible. And I my spirituality, I always say you could have fit it on a grape. I know it sounds crazy, but I didn't know about the law of attraction. I was very small in my spirituality thinking, because I didn't know what a shaman was, or Akashic records and all that stuff. I didn't know anything, and I didn't know it going all the way up to my NDE at all. It's all blossomed since my NDE. So it's been an incredible ride. And the only other thing I want to say prior to my fall is I was and my friend I was talking to one of my girlfriends I graduated with, and she's like one of my best girlfriends. And I was telling her that I was very shy before I got hurt. And she laughed. She says, "No, you're not." She says, "You talk her ears off and you blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yeah, that's, if I got to know you, if I got put in a situation where I was in the same room as you or whatever like that, and it was every day in class, I just got to know people and I would talk to you. But to approach you in public or to get to know you outside of that, that wasn't me." And I was afraid of I've said it on many interviews now, but at 44, I was afraid to use the phone and call anybody. Yeah, it was pretty, I was pretty, yeah, it was pretty bad.
Okay, well, are you ready to share what happened in your NDE?
Yeah, sure. Great. Yeah. So fast forward to November 15, 2009, I had moved to Hammertown Road. I rent a house from my brother John, sister-in-law Mary Ann, and it's a dead end road, and I've never really walked on this road. And again, I was missing my kids. So there's two things I decided I would do to help myself. Is one, I love metal detecting. It's my biggest hobby. Been doing it 30, now it's 30 something years, 38 years or whatever like that. But prior to that, I that was my big hobby. And then the other thing is being Bubba, I've always battled weight, like being, but so I decided that I would walk every day after work, and two, I would metal detect, like one week and day, I would just go metal detecting all day. So that's what I did on November 15th, 2009. And I came home and I felt okay. I was living on my own. My mom and dad were visiting me. They live in Pine Plains, but they were living in Vegas part-time, Las Vegas. And they actually came home and stayed with me because it would be like they're on vacation, even though their house is only a few miles away. But they came to stay with me. They were out, and I'm a horrible cook. So I got home and I made myself a tuna, not so special tuna stuff. I just am not very good at cooking. So I ate it, so I didn't feel well. So then I said, Sunday night, I'm going to roll around in bed. Maybe I'll go out and move around, get a little air and exercise. But I wasn't really exercising. I was just going out for a walk. And so I decided I would walk on this road, which I never really walk on and never been walking on because I always go to town to walk. So that's what I did. So I went out, walked, and I got out. It's a dead end road, and I got out to the entranceway, and there was a car there, and they seemed like they were drunk, so I didn't want to interact with them being that it was dark. It's a town road, so I just I did bring a flashlight. I just assumed it's a dead end road. I walk on the road. I do a little bit of walking. I come back. So I walked out towards the end, and this car made me turn around, and then I got back to my house, which is a very short walk. Like, I don't know, maybe I did a quarter mile the whole trip there and back. And I still didn't feel well. So I said, let me go past my house down the hill. And I ended up going past my neighbor's house. And then I said, oh, that's good. So I turned around, and I was at night. If I'm walking at night, I face traffic. And the other thing I do, if I see a car coming, I stop and I move off the road. So on the way back to my house, I saw car lights, which I thought were car lights, which, to be honest with you, I have no idea whether they were car lights or not, but it made me move off the side of the road. So I moved off the side of the road. Next thing I know, I slipped and I was falling head first. Like the whole world just opened up. And I was ended up falling head first, which ended up being a culvert. So I landed on my head from 14 feet. My head went because I was 5'10", they say 19 feet. But, from the top of where the road is to the bottom of the gully, the culvert, it's 14 feet. So I landed on my left side of my head. My head hit first, my left side all caved in. And then my left shoulder hit next, then my left rib area, and then my left side of my legs hit. And my whole right side of my body never hit the ground. That's how I fell. So I got knocked out. I don't know how long. Time is irrelevant when it comes to all this because I have no idea time-wise anything else. And I was unconscious for a second, 2 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, something. And I woke to, and I was like, I started to feel this fluid all over me, which ended up being my blood. I didn't, at first I didn't know what it was. I was in a lot of pain, but I was also, confused, and then I knew started to realize I was in trouble. So the first thing I did was I reached up with my right hand because I ended up fracturing my shoulder, so I couldn't use my left arm. But I reached around with my right arm, and I reached in my head, and my fingers went in my skull. And then I knew I was in
That's not a
trouble.
good sign, Bubba.
Yeah, I knew I was in trouble. When I was really in a lot of pain, and when I tell you how much damage I did, you could but that was the first thing. My fingers went in, and then I knew I was in trouble. And then I started to think like what to do, and some of the things I thought about to do are incredible that I hit my head and I actually thought of them. So I first thing I thought about was my cell phone, and it's a dead end road. It's horrible cell service here, and that went through my mind. And then the second thing went through my mind. I had the old flip phone. Yes, I was old school. I had the flip phone. Well, that thing doesn't light up unless somebody calls you or unless you find it and open it up or something. So I knew that would be a waste of time. And I really did. I really thought that process like, okay, that's going to waste my time, my energy. And then did the most natural thing after that is I called out for help. And in the process of calling out for help, I don't remember the exact words, but I do remember that I included God in my please God help me somebody, that kind of. But I included God in the whole mix of the screaming, and I don't know how long I screamed, and I don't know how loud it ended up being or anything like that. But after doing it for a little bit, I realized two things were happening. One, it was a lot lower. The more I screamed, the lower it got. And two, it was like wasn't going to get anybody there kind of thing because I ended up having 11 fractured ribs. So I
Oh
couldn't
my
breathe.
gosh. Wow, that's so painful. I bruised a rib one time and it hurt for weeks. I can't
Yeah,
imagine fracturing
yeah,
them.
yeah. I fractured 11 of them. I fractured seven on the left. And remember, I said my body didn't hit the ground on the right. I fractured four on the right. That's how hard I hit. And they never hit the ground. So that's why I couldn't really scream anymore. I could barely breathe, let alone scream, but I tried. And after that, I just decided, that was a waste. Then, this is all going on fast. And then for me, it really happened. I don't know how you would see it. I don't know how, I'm no expert in this. I just know what happened to me. And this is what happened to me for me, it really did. I started to really start to think I was going to die. It started really becoming an option. And as I was going along, it became more of an option. And my life started to go in front of me, and it really did. My mind started moving. So uh, my two kids, John, Lauren, and Logan here, and my other kids, they were living. And then I thought of my two kids in heaven, James and Robert. And the reason why I say heaven is if you believe in heaven, James lived 10 days and died. He didn't have a chance to sin. So if you believe in heaven, that's where good odds he would be. And of course, Robert was only 18 when he died. So that's, if you believe in heaven, the chances are to be there. So I started thinking of them and I started thinking of my kids on earth and I started getting mixed. Then it came to me, and I have to tell you, I didn't know if I believed I believe in heaven, but I didn't know if I would go there. I didn't know if I did good, enough stuff, or like I said, I'm just a Christian, don't know the Bible. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to church. I wasn't doing this. I wasn't really, uh, you know, wasn't the best prayer until I actually read the book of Bruce Wilkinson. That's a whole nother story. We won't get into that, but that helped change my prayer life. I say the prayer of Jabez is, my big prayer that I, did. And I started to get better at it, but still, even that, I wasn't that good at it. And, I didn't know all the spiritual stuff. And so I didn't know where I was going. So then I started wondering that myself. And then it came, after all going through all those thoughts, it came to my son Robert and my ex-wife Yanina finding Robert dead after 3 or 4 days. And then I started thinking about me, and I started feeling bad for who's going to find me, because I already figured out that at that point I knew that I had like disappeared, kind of like it's like, okay, where am I, And they were going to have to get the dogs to find me. I knew that. I started to kind of say, well, they're not going to find me in time, and they're going to have to get the dogs. So I started thinking of that, and so I said, at that time, I said, if I could figure out where I am and where I came from, and if I could even get back to where it all started, I could die, and then someone could find me a lot sooner than later. So I was able to move a little bit, and I was able to see there's like this big wall on my one side, and there's a field. So then I remembered I was walking, and I said, that's must be where I came from, this wall. So I said, if I can get to the top of that wall, then I could die. So that was my goal. So I decided I would, move to the, ended up being by the road to die. And then I, of course, came to the conclusion, well, I don't even know if I can move or not. Because I hadn't moved yet. I really haven't moved yet. I moved my right arm, but I haven't moved my legs or nothing like that. And they were hurting. But by the grace of God, I didn't hurt anything in my legs other than scratches and bruises, simple stuff. So I moved my leg and I was able to turn over, which I'm sure with, your bruised ribs or whatever you said you had, you roll on them, they hurt, whatever
Right,
you have.
right.
So I was able to roll over on my side, and I rolled on my right side, my right shoulder. I knew my left side was really, really hurting, really, really bad. And my right side was hurting, but I rolled on my right, and I started to crawl on these rocks. That's what I landed on, rocks. And I was able to get to this hill, and it's really steep, short but steep. And I said, this is where I got to go. So I started climbing the hill on my stomach like a snake, and my arm kind of slithering up the hill. And I would go like a foot or two, and I would fall back a foot. And of course, this whole time I'm crying. The blood and the tears started mixing together because, I'm kind of going to my death. That was my option. I mean, it really was. There was, for many reasons, it's a dead end road on a Sunday night. Not too many cars. It's not like I'm on Main Street and somebody find me and get, ambulance. And how much pain I was in, I just couldn't fathom even thinking of living. So I climbed the hill, and it was quite the climb. Took all my energy, everything I had to climb this hill. So I come to this area which ended up being next to the road, and I could see a flat. Everything's so dark, but I could see like a more not natural flat area, meaning like it wasn't the ground or the leaves or the dirt or anything. It was like a man-made flat, which ended up being the road. So I kind of knew at that point I was like, I made it. So I came upon this log, which is incredible part of the story, is and that's where I decided I would, die. So I laid on this log, and I had my arms over it, and everybody in the world would know they're laying on a log at night in the dark, but could you describe it? So I couldn't describe, at that point, I couldn't describe it. I just knew I was laying on a log, and I decided I did my accomplishment, and I closed my eyes and said, that was it. I'm done. I did my job. Of course, tears are flowing and all that stuff's flowing, the blood's flowing and everything like that. But I made it. So that's what I did. It took all my energy, it took everything I had in me, and I actually moved the road to die. Uh, I've done a bunch of interviews and talked to people individually, and people that, real believers believe that I had help getting up the hill and stuff like that. I I didn't feel any angels at the time or any extra help up the hill. It was a very, 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 very painful climb. I said I did it myself. I'm okay if people say I had help, or, and God's always with us, or the spirit, so I'm okay, whatever. But it was very, very, painful climb. Uh, but I made it. So I felt that was my last accomplishment of my life to make it that. Now I don't know if I'm going to heaven or not, not like that. I don't know what's going to happen. But I basically at that moment had one foot in death's door and one foot out. I never died. I never died. Uh, I was as near death maybe as you could be without dying. I was breathing still. My heart was still pumping. And yeah, I was on that log. So it was, I was crying, but I know it's going to sound weird, but I was peaceful in a way because I think I just gave up on, everything. Everything was just, that was it. So I was laying there, and I don't know how long I was laying there. And as kids, this is the best way I've described it because people have asked me, like, we oversleep as kids, and our parents turn on the bedroom light, and it like shines light on the outside of our eyelids, and it makes us open our eyes. That's what happened to me. So this bright light started shining, and it was on the outside of our eyelids. So I opened my eyes, and it was just downright gorgeous. It was just getting brighter and brighter. And at the time, it was, in the beginning, it was kind of like a white, kind of whitish light. And then it started getting colors. And like I said, this is what happened to me. I don't know what people would see or anything. And it just kind of got brighter and more colorful. And it was just, oh my God. To be back at that moment, it was gorgeous. Even though I was in that much damage and stuff, but it was just unbelievable. And of course, I'm confused. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And in this light, this figure started coming out of the light. And I was like, okay. So then I have to say, I'm not going to, my first thought was, man, maybe I made it to heaven and they're coming to get me. Because I knew I was still on the log. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't float out of my body. I was still hanging on that log like someone that flipped a boat and was hanging on the boat for dear life. That was me. And the figure got even more closer. And then I was able to see it started to get a little more cleaner and clearer. And it started to look like a grandfather, the figure. And it started to have a white robe. And it got closer and closer. And then to his side, all of a sudden, my kids started to show up, Robert and James, with them. And they got closer, and it started getting closer and closer to me. And then it was, they never like stood right on the ground like, hey, I heard the road like they did. They were kind of lost it a little bit, but it got closer and closer and closer. And then I saw this, and then all the features started coming, and it looked like a grandfatherly figure. Now, real important to my story or my testimony is if that light came, just a light, I'd be dead on that log because I wouldn't understand anything that was happening. If an orb showed up, I'd be dead on that log because I wouldn't know what was happening. I really wouldn't. I would have no concept. So the only way for Jim Bubba Bay to know anything that's going on is it had to be what I was taught as a little kid, God's, grandfatherly robe and all that stuff. So that's what God appeared to me as, because it's the only thing I would understand. And then the second thing, and the Christians and the real people that know the Bible and all that stuff, they jump on me, they question me, and they tell me that the Bible says you can't see God. Well, when we got talking, me and God, and it was within, it wasn't like you and I talking, it was kind of within, kind of like telepathic.
Like telepathic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of talk it was. That figure said, my son Jesus, to me. Now, I'm no expert. I'm far from, I'm an expert at falling off a road now, unfortunately, but I'm no expert. But so I don't know. It could have been God talking through Jesus's body. I don't know, but they say you can't see, but I met God. That's what, and it's that one statement, my son Jesus, that made me think I met God. If people say I met Jesus, I'm okay with it. I'm not here to convince anybody, tell anybody different, but that's and that's why he appeared that way. If somebody believed in an orb and that's what they thought all their life, it's an orb, or if they believed it was a woman, I really believe it would show up as a woman, because God comes and Jesus comes in what you need and on their time, but at the right time when you need him most, and stuff like that. So that's where I was at. So I proceeded to, of course, I was in awe the whole time. Now, the other thing is my blood didn't stop pouring. My bones didn't get healed. You know, what happened is I was in such awe that my brain kind of put that all that pain into the back burner, and I was just in awe, you know. So it felt like it was kind of taken away from me, but it really wasn't. It just I was like, wow, this is amazing. So we proceeded to have a conversation. I I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go to heaven. I didn't go break bread with Moses and hang out at the table, or I didn't go anywhere. I just stayed on this log the whole time, and I say a little bit of heaven came to me that night. And a really key thing that happened, people want to know, a couple of things were discussed that were personal. They weren't going to change the world. And if they were going to change the world or help somebody else, I would share them. But they're just little personal things, little tidbits. But the one thing for me personally, back a little while ago, I had said, I don't know the Bible. And the reason why I don't know the Bible is from as long as I can remember, this is my own Jim Bubba Bay, this is my own feelings and my own opinion. If that's God's word, why is all the killing in the Bible? And why is there all this killing about the Bible? You know, if it's supposed to be this peaceful, great word, all this bad stuff happens in the Bible and because of the Bible and all this through history. And I'm no scholar, so I can't tell you AD to, you know, I can't say anything like that. I just know what happened. And like even the scientists got killed by the Catholic priests killed scientists because they were like supposed to be way out there and stuff like that, and all this stuff happening. So that's why I don't know the Bible. So that was my biggest question my whole life. And I was 44 years old when I met God that night. And for 40, well, when I was a kid, I didn't think about it, but at some point it became a question, teenager, whatever, or 20s. I forget exactly when it started, but for 20, 25 years, that's your number one question. And you meet God or Jesus or Spirit, there's a good odds they're going to answer your biggest question because they know everybody. You know, Spirit knows, Jesus knows. They know. So that night, God answered my question. And he said to me, he said, notice all those that use the Bible for their own good, man, yes, they use it and they're in power, but they don't stay in power forever. And God and Bible continue on to this day. And those that used it are no longer in power. So I was like, huh. So it was quite an eye opener for me. And that's exactly how it was kind of explained to me. And it made sense after hearing that, you know. So yeah, some of the people that use it could be 200 years they're in power and they mold it to the way they want. But it's always man's interpretation, you know, that takes it the wrong way and stuff like that. So we continued to chat for a little bit. It was a brief, again, I don't know time, but it was a brief time. And while I was there, you know, having the conversation, it was so bright. I was able to see I was on the log, and I was able to, you know, the logs that lose their bark and their branches, and they look like a telephone pole had fallen over. I was laying on a log like that. So I was able to see I was laying on this log. And so I remembered it. It was so vivid in my mind and everything. So we had a little more conversation and nothing earth shattering to change the world and like that.
Mhm.
And he did say I had things for me to do for him, and I'm
Mhm.
supposed to listen. Of course, I'm just Jim Bubba Bay, you know, gas station or landscaper gas station guy. What am I going to do for God? But anyway, so I still thought that, but and then he left, and I never did talk to my kids. They look, they again. I think it's because I had my son pass away, James, with me knowing he's moving his feet and the little guy. They looked healthy to me, but they were the way I remembered them, you know. And maybe it was, you know, kind of the way they had to approach me. I'm no expert, but it's the way they, you know, how I remember them. is what I remember. I'm 18, a little guy, you know. That's what I remember, man, and that's the way they approached, and that's the way they came. So I think the one thing that was key is that, and one of the reasons why we're there, and this is after the fact, this is going after I, months and whatever after I ended up living, is they were there to kind of remind me and to solidify that what I was seeing was coming from heaven. Because again, James lived 10 days. If you believe in heaven, where would he come from? And Robert's the same thing. So it kind of like gave me confidence that what I was seeing was, there. So then they left, and it was like a candle. It was amazing because now my eyes are open. It was like a candle going further, getting light. And then it was like somebody poof, put their fingers and out the candle went. And here's the crazy part. Not once did God tell me what was going to happen next or how I was going to say, he was just basically said I had things to do for him and now's not my time, and about the Bible and stuff like that. But he didn't say, okay, the ambulance is going to show up or, and like that. So now I'm back in the dark on this log with all this pain. And I'll share the pain right now because I think it really helps. Is I ended up fracturing my skull, brain bleed, concussion, traumatic brain injury. I broke my left scapula. I broke 11 ribs, 7 on the left. I broke 4 on the right. I broke C7 2 ways. And I broke from T1 to T12. I broke 9 of those. And I broke 2 of those 2 ways. So I broke 23 bones with 26 fractures.
Oh my gosh. Your
Yeah.
body had to have been in shock, or you probably would have still been passed out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Part of that was all that, adrenaline shock kind of thing. But and here's the crazy thing about it, and is Christopher Reeve broke C7 and he was quadriplegic, right? The Superman Christopher Reeve and stuff like that. I don't know the exact, thing like that, and he's paralyzed and stuff like that. I break 13 fractures on my neck and spine. And here I am. And then I crawl up the hill and do all this crazy stuff. And even today, I'm still walking, you know? So
That is incredible.
yeah, it's just like, and because since my accident, no one ever, all the, they always share the, they never share names, but the therapists, they share stories. And I know like 3 or 4 people that went on their little 3-foot light bulb on their porch, changed their light bulb, fell off, fell down a few feet and fractured their back, and they're paralyzed. And that's like 14 feet through the air and land on my head and all that. So to fast forward, so what happened after I ended up meeting God and stuff like that, I know it's symbolic, but I ended up looking over to my left. I couldn't move my neck much, but I got to see there was a light on in this house from far away. I said, that's where I gotta go. I know it sounds crazy, but it was the only light in the whole road's all dark. There's no street lights, no traffic lights, no car lights, no house lights, all in this little light. But I knew if I now I knew God told me I was gonna live, but I didn't think I was gonna. It still was very much down in my mind. So I knew if I crawl, I'm dead because I was bleeding too much. I knew I had to walk. Again, when I'm on this log, I don't know all that fractures. I don't know what I did to my body. I just know I'm in serious pain. So I said, I got to walk. So I actually got up. It's funny, when I came out of a coma in the hospital, they all thought I crawled to the neighbor's house. And when I told them, no, I actually walked, people they were mind blown that I actually got up and walked. Not a good walk, but I got up. So I got up once. I fell back down because gravity just was, took over to all those bones. And then I knew once I got back up again, I couldn't fall again, because if I fall again, I'm done. And I know God told me I was going to live, but I still questioned, because of all the pain. So I got up and I ended up walking 200 and something feet to my neighbor's house. We call it the Notre Dame Shuffle in the book we wrote with my friend Mickey and I. We were trying to describe it, and I shuffled my feet, bent over, hunched over as much as I could, and I kind of shuffled my feet. So I ended up at my neighbor's house. The poor woman, I knocked on her door or rang the doorbell. I forget what happened. And she opened the door, and there I was, a bloody mess. And afterwards, she wrote for the book. I actually write her experience, and she said it was like example would be like Freddy Krueger was in the neighborhood. That's how bad I looked. I was
Wow.
blood everywhere, gushing everywhere. I was a mess. And then I passed out on her lawn. I was in and out, but I passed out. And yeah, so they took over an hour and a half, over an hour to get me off the lawn. They're going to fly me in a helicopter, but it was too foggy. So I went by ambulance. They took an hour to get me on the backboard. I guess I was screaming bloody murder the whole time. Um, and then I ended up getting to the hospital, and it took them over. My brother, my mom, and my father came down that night, and they sent them home like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They still didn't know all the damage I had done, so it took them quite a while to figure out all the damage. They induced a coma because I was going to die. I just wasn't going to live with all the pain. Anyway, excuse me. And so I told them, and I told them I met God at a log, and I described this log. And they said to me, Jimmy, they didn't really look at the log, so they couldn't say, yeah, this is exactly what the log was like. But they said there was a lot of blood on the log that I stopped at. So
Makes sense.
I was like, oh. So that made me feel a little more like, okay, maybe this is all, true and stuff like that. Really happened to me. And then fast forward, excuse me. Fast forward, my brother and sister-in-law made a Karen Bridge website for me. It's a
Yep.
great thing. If people don't know about it, you can make it for sick or whatever, and people get emails when something new happens. So they made it for me, and it was a great way that people stay in contact to learn about people, how they are and stuff. I was in rehab, and my brother and sister-in-law uh, said, "Hey, do you want to go see your page on Karen Bridge?" I was like, "Okay." So they wheeled me in a wheelchair and stuff, and they read my neighbor wrote, "I must have met God that night." I get chills when I read it to this day because she put God in her message that God put her on her door step. That was powerful. And
That
then
is.
my brother said to me, "Do you want to see where you fell?" And I didn't know if I was ready for it because it's pretty traumatic. But I was like, okay. So he clicks the picture on. Now this picture was taken the next morning. I fell in the 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, like early 8 o'clock the next morning, or whatever like that. Pictures were taken, and one so I think when they saw my sister-in-law's sister, they could be like, "This is where Jim fell," because I fell off a road. How wacko was that, right? Hey, Jim fell off a road. How do you fall off a road? Here it is. Jim Bobet does it. So anyway, I ended up. So they took pictures like that morning, and there, in the first picture he showed me, was the log I met God at. I described straight, 100% perfect, out of a coma. And there it was that I met God at in the dark. And there's only one light, was God's light, because it was dark. There's no street lights. There's no houses near where I fell. There's no car lights because I was that close to the road. Somebody would have stopped and helped me. There was no other light than God's light. It was too foggy for the helicopter to fly to get me. So there was only one light. And they're in the picture. And I have the pictures. I didn't realize that fast forward, it's been what, uh, yeah, not on 14 years. I'm going through a drawer about 2 months ago, and I'm like, oh, what's this big yellow thing kind of thing? I open up, it's pictures of where I fell, and there's the log straight out of it's still there. Obviously it's still there because the picture's there, but there it is. I described straight out of a coma where I met God at, and the only way I could tell you how it was is some light had to show up.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story and your experience with us. So, can I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to know, when you talked about seeing James, who was your infant who died at 10 days, and Robert, your son who died at 18 from kidney failure, how did they appear to you when you saw them when you were on the log? Were they in a like a solid human form? Were they more of like a transparent figure? How did they appear?
God and the kids and everybody was more human like looking. they weren't like ghostly.
Okay.
And I think partly for that, for me, again, for me, I don't know. I don't know. I might have, even though they were my kids, I might have been kind of scared, you know. So they were more, you know, would I say they were like me and you, solid like that? No, but they were more solid than ghostly to me. And I think it was because that's what I could understand.
So was James an infant? Was he like in a like swaddled, or was he kind of in a position? I mean, was he being held? How did he appear that way?
He was with Robert, you know, an infant, you know what I
Okay.
mean? And that's the way, and they were both the way I remember them. And again, it could be they grow up and get big in heaven and all that, if you believe in all that stuff. I don't know, but they came the way I could comprehend.
Yeah.
Uh, and maybe I would recognize my son Robert, but you want to know something? He looked different at age, you know, whatever it is. So he died in, yeah, so only 2 years before that. But anyway, he would look similar, but they both looked the same to me because that's what I comprehended, you know, at the time, you
Okay.
know. So, but and they looked healthy to me, you know, but they did anyway because they had internal injury. You know what I mean? They had internal stuff. Like Robert was never a fat kid or anything like that. So he was tall and lanky, and James was 10 days old and a pound 4 ounces. You know, so that's the way I kind of saw them. I didn't, you know, it was more their faces than paying attention to their body. Of course, got to remember, I was, you know, there's to me, which ended up being God for me, you know, and I was concentrating on God. I know it's, you know, but I was in awe. So
So when a lot of people have a near-death experience and they do leave their bodies and go to the other side, they oftentimes describe having a certain feeling. So you didn't leave your body, but you were in that place and God is there, your two sons are there. Did they emit some type of a feeling or an emotion? Did you feel anything?
yeah, I was like, well, one, it was peaceful. I was, and the other thing was, I was just in such awe, um, that I just was blown away. I was like, it was so peaceful, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Second would be my kids, I guess you could say, but really, it was just incredible. Uh, I just was blown away. I really was. I felt for a while too when the conversation was going on. I still didn't know. Okay, let's go to heaven. Come on, you're going with us. You know, in the beginning, I didn't know that, and then after a while, it became like that way. That okay, I'm not going anywhere. This is incredible. I was just so blown away. It just was incredible. Uh, and the other thing that happened to me, fast forward now, is most people leave their body and go places. And here I had an in-body experience. And I went to speak at the IANS conference in Colorado. The big, it was, I was on a panel. I wasn't Jim Bubba Bay by myself, but there was three of us. We had a little experience. When I got there the first day, I had spoke the second day. Everybody just left their body. They went to break bread with Moses. They went down the tunnel. They blah 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 and all this stuff. And I literally, I'm not gonna lie, I felt out of place. There was
Hmm.
not one story of anybody, and I was gonna not talk. I was kind of like, okay, I don't belong here. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't nothing special. I didn't go on this trip, and I didn't see myself laying on the log. I didn't do anything, and it's incredible how God's spirit works. So the next day, now I'm still doubting myself. There's no lie. I'm not doubting I didn't break the bones and all that stuff and fell, and I'm here to talk about it. But I doubted, you know, okay, maybe I'm not an NDE guy. I literally did. I was like, and so because of my broken back, Eben Alexander was speaking, the
Hmm.
main speaker, and we were going to speak in that room. It was the big room, and we were going to speak in it. Well, the chairs they have in there bothered my back. They were bothering my back. I have 13 fractures, and then I have a landscaping back from my lower back's messed up. So my whole back's messed up from my job and then my accident.
Mhm.
And so I told my daughter, because she went with me on the trip, I said, I'm going to go down. I want to see Evan talk before her thing. And she said, okay, Dad, and she's a teenage girl and took her forever to get ready and stuff. So I went down and it's amazing how it is. I didn't really want to go sit on those chairs because I knew I was going to be a lot of pain. Then I had to go sit up on the stage and all that stuff. So I said, boy, wouldn't it be nice to sit in those? It was a big motel. Those chairs that are in the lobbies and stuff like that, that are like living room chairs. And I said, boy, wouldn't it be nice? So I walked down there, and do you know, they've never had these doors open ever because I had been there a day and a half already. And I walked down, and here's in the lobby is these group of chairs. The doors are open, and you can watch Eben Alexander and hear him from the lobby. So the old me would have never sat next to this guy. The new me says, sir, do you mind I sit here? He goes, no, have at it. So I sit down, and of course they have like a thing with the speaker, author, experiencer. It's kind of like, hey, this is me, kind of a label, like a thing. So I had it on my thing. Do you know within 5 minutes, this woman showed up like kind of like out of nowhere. She proceeds to tell me that she brought this crystal at the conference. She lost the crystal and she couldn't find it because she had been there like 2 days. And anyway, she was there before me. And that morning, she got off the elevator and her crystal was on the table across from the elevator. And she had lost it for like 28 hours or something like that. And then she goes like this. So right away, I'm like already blown. I'm like, okay. And then she looks at me. She goes, oh, you're a speaker. You're an author. You're an experiencer. She goes, you have an NDE? And the nicest old lady. She goes, you have an NDE? I said, yeah. And before I even could get what happened to me, because I got a little 15-second version, believe it or not, I talk a lot. Anyway, she goes, let me tell you about my experience. I've been coming to this conference for 23 years, and I had an NDE, and it was an in-body NDE, and I was saved in the water. I don't know where this. I was drowning, and this figure came up, this man and this bulk and mustard guy, and picked me up out of the water and carried me, and I never left my body, and I've been coming for 23 years. And I was like, okay, God, now you told me I belong. This woman's becoming more than most anybody in the whole place. And she had an in-body. And then after that, it was funny, like the floodgates opened. Someone come up, talk to me. They had an in-body experience. So it was amazing.
So you said that God told you that there were things he wanted you to do. Did you come back with the memory of what those things that he wanted you to do were?
No, what I at first I was thinking of trying to think about, but what it is like uh listen, and when he calls or something calls and stuff like that, you go do it. Intuition and stuff like that.
So how do
Uh
you understand that it's him versus like your own inner voice? Is there something that helps you understand?
Yep. So first time it happened. Jim Bubba Bay is horrible at intuition. Had none before. None at all. Zero. Okay. I'm just a normal natural guy, right? Has zero intuition. Fast forward back. It's funny how all this stuff's intertwined. Love metal detecting. It's my biggest hobby. Been doing it for 38 years now. After my accident, I finally get to the point where I can go. I went metal detecting with a cane and stuff because that's how much I love it. But I finally got to go without a cane. And I said, I'm going. I'm going this day. I'm just going to go. I woke up and I didn't know it, but God spoke to me that day. God, the angels, whoever, the connection was there and said, no, you're not to go metal detecting. You're going to go do this. And I said, nope, I'm going metal detecting. So I ignored it. Do you know I probably had one of the worst days metal detecting in my whole life because I ignored it. So I didn't get hurt, nothing I was like that, but found nothing, found a bunch of junk, and it was bad. Although it's still a bad day, metal detecting is better day work, right? But it still was bad. It was horrible. So I started driving home, and I've always, I not as much now, but part of the way I stay connected to God is I listen to Christian music and stuff, and I had it on the radio. So I started thinking about stuff, and I was like, I don't know, maybe that was something I was supposed to listen to. So fast forward, that was my only experience, and it was horrible. 3 weeks later, my kids come. Do they love metal detecting? No, but they like to hang out with their dad. So I planned a day to go metal detecting with my kids, Logan and Lauren. My son John's already at college stuff. But yeah, we're going metal detecting. The last they knew, we went to bed going metal detecting. I woke up that morning ready to go metal detecting, and I got that message again. And I got told I was supposed to go. I didn't even know what it was happening. I was supposed to go to this walkway across the Hudson in Poughkeepsie, New York. They took the old railroad tracks and they turned it into a walkway that you can walk and bridge. And it's long, goes across the whole Hudson River. And there's a brain injury walk to raise money, and you're going to go there. And I was like, okay, no, I got plans. And then I remembered how horrible my plans turned out last time. And
You're a
I
quick
said,
learner at least.
and I said to my kids, I said, guess what? We're not going metal detecting. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, we're going to go to this walkway. I don't even know what it is really, this brain injury thing. I have no idea. And the funny thing is, it kind of just showed up. And then I got my phone, and I never saw the advertiser yet. And then it was in my phone. It was like in the Facebook, like, come to the walkway. I didn't even know it was existing. It was like, oh, okay. And it was an incredible day. And the other thing I learned that day is I need to meet people for me. For
Mm,
me, I'm inspired. Yes, it's inspiring to meet me. That I'm still living after all that damage. If you know my story, and but we all still need inspiration ourselves. And but on the same token, people needed to meet me that day. It was
oh,
it was
yeah.
the one day. It was such interaction back and forth that day. I met incredible people, and like I said before, I am as blessed of a brain injury person as a brain injury person could be blessed. I have my deficits, and if you hung around me, you would see them here and there. But I am a highly, highly functioning brain injury person.
That's
I do.
wonderful.
So it really, really, and since then, it was the lesson um, that I learned, and that's how it comes. Uh, like now with the book, I'm a bad salesman. I give almost all away. People I meet, I just give them to them. But I get messages. A homeless person came to our gas station, and I could just tell. Just it was like they they're really not where they want to be, but they're where they want to be, but they want to spend some time. And so I gave them my book, because God's in it and the faith, keep the faith and stuff like that. And it's spiritual. There's only a Bible quote in the beginning of the book because it talks about a man falling down and getting back up. And that's me. I
Okay.
fell off a road. Other than that, there's not 1 ounce of Bible, no religion in the whole book. It's all spiritual. So anyway, so I got the message downloaded to me to give this guy the
Oh,
book. And I haven't shared this with anybody else because it's kind of emotional, but he came back and it changed his life reading that book, and it made him better. At the time, it didn't take him off the street like he's not homeless. It didn't solve his problems, but it made his life better from that point. And that wasn't me. That's just, it was told to me, you know, and you know, and I don't walk around going, hey, I fell off the road and stuff like that. It's like spirit, universe says, here you are.
right.
Somebody wants to talk to you, kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
I listen. I've gotten better, and I used to not be a great listener. So that's another lesson. I've learned to listen. Some people, like probably you, have it from birth. People get this intuition, they just roll with it. But me, it's like, wow, this is all new. And then to be um so extrovert now. I talk to everybody, anybody. Uh,
That's wonderful. Well, so can you tell us how people can find you if they want to connect to you, if they want to find your book?
sure. James 2 Bay, the number 2 at yahoo.com is my email. And then my Facebook is Jim Bubba Bay is my page. That's a great way to get a hold of me. And then my book's on Amazon, and it's called Miracle on Hammertown Road. And it's an ebook, audio book, and a paperback book. And like I said, I'm not the best salesman and stuff. I only bring, it's funny when I do talk to people, I don't bring the book up to sell books. I bring the book up, I bring things in the book because it's a good explanation of, like, God told me to give him the book and ended up helping him out because God knew what was in there, you know. So anyway, that kind of stuff. I'm not a very good salesman,
Well, that's
but
okay. I think
yeah.
your story is wonderful. I think that you've probably given a lot of people who have had a loss, like a loss of a child, hope. And I really thank you for being brave enough to share the story, because it's a lot to put yourself out there, and people have their own opinions, and I think it's really special that you're sharing it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, people can think what they want. I'm okay. My job isn't to convince anybody. If people want to listen, I talk. If not, I'm okay. You know. But thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful time with you. Nice to meet you too, and
Yeah,
all your
nice.
audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.